Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021. It's Groundhog Day again. You can't say it any other way, I guess. Probably made the same reference last year and probably the year before. I would imagine every year that we had a February 2nd show. We should look back and find out whether that's the case. I don't see how else you can possibly start the show at this point. And whichever one it is, I never really got it clear in my head. It doesn't make any sense, Groundhog Day, but I guess it was he didn't see his shadow, and so therefore it's, or maybe, I don't know, what is it? If he sees his shadow, it's more winter. I think that's it, which doesn't make any sense to me, because intuitively I thought, well, if it's sunny out and he sees his shadow, then why would we think there's more winter? But I guess it's also counterintuitive the way these weather forecasting groundhogs are able to do this. It may be that science just never discovers what lies at the bottom of their predictive abilities, or they have none and it's all just some crazy tradition. I don't know. You tell me. We're into science these days, apparently. I don't know. 500,000 people nearly dead from coronavirus, but we're asking groundhogs, how long will winter be? When the answer is, well, it goes until about, March 21st, and that's the answer, and yada, yada, yada. Okay, well, whatever. Anyway, we decided to depend on groundhogs for that. Okay. They get scared of their shadow and run back in the hole. So what does that mean?
That means they go back and they burrow in their hole, so they stay in their den.
Yeah,
the winter.
Right. But it's like if it's sunny out, what are you scared of, kid? All right. Well, anyway, they're scared of shadows, and have no idea how warm it is, or isn't, or whatever. Why would you? That's right. Well, I'm scared of clowns, and so if I come out of my hole on February 2nd and there's a birthday party going on, then there's 6 more weeks of winter. I'm not scared of clowns, and I've never really understood why anybody would be, but whatever. Anyway, okay, so it's all about fear, which also may have been generated by, being dragged out of your hole, I guess, and surrounded by, I see the pictures. It is just like the movie. 6 idiots in top hats have pulled me out of my hibernation hole, which isn't even anything. I guess it's a little box that they keep them in. And I don't know. What can I tell you? It's a stupid tradition, and probably the stupider it is, the more popular it is. It's just the way we are with American traditions. All right, the Kagro in the Morning radio show is live. This is the Bill in Portland, Maine morning tradition every Groundhog Day. We acknowledge that there is a message here from Bill, and sometimes we remember to read it. That's our tradition here. Today is Groundhog Radio Host, or Ground Radio Host Day. That's a hard word to read. He's made this one up. Ground Radio Host Day. If Kagro X sees his shadow, let's check around. There's a lot of other shadows. I can't make out whether mine, but if I saw it, we get 6 more weeks of kilohertz. All right, cool. Why not? Let's listen. I don't think we use any kilohertz on this thing because we're fake radio. We're just, I don't know. I guess there's some kilohertz. I don't know. Something is something involved in recording this thing. Anyway, we may just be killing the joke at this point. Perhaps that's it. All right, lots to catch up on today. Today is Tuesday, and so we are hoping to hear from Joan McCarter later today in the 10 o'clock hour. Nothing, I don't think there's any major emergencies happening on Capitol Hill today. Every day is a calm day, I guess, compared to, say, the insurrection, which smashed its way into the Capitol and threatened to kill several members of Congress. Everyone probably that is talking about, if they're on social media, talking about the time that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez took out yesterday to broadcast a Instagram live, if I have that correct. I think Instagram was the platform she used for this thing. But a live video description of what her experiences were on that day, which, is, of course, still relevant and makes a lot of sense given that we are now a week out from opening up Trump's impeachment trial. The word is that the guy who currently says he's one of his lawyers and plans to stay, for the moment anyway, through the end of the trial, so I guess that counts as his lawyer, makes it clear that, yes, they have no intention of arguing about whether or not Trump was right or wrong to have sent people to smash in the doors of the Capitol and threaten to kill members of Congress unless they lied about who won the Electoral College vote and reversed everything and decided to make him president again. And instead argue that he had First Amendment right to do all of that anyway, and what's the big deal, or something like that. I'm not certain exactly where he thinks he's going with that argument, but that's what he intends to do. It happened to catch my attention this morning because there was a tweet circulating with video of this person who claims to be his lawyer still on some television program or another, and announcing that, if the Democrats call witnesses, well, we're not going to, mess with them. We're just going to argue that we had a First Amendment right to do all of this. Oh, yes, it was Lindsey Graham, actually, who's not one of the lawyers, but in fact one of the jurors, who said that if Democrats, he was busy threatening, if Democrats called witnesses, they too, Republicans, would call witnesses, and surely we would all be scared about that because they were going to call some, I don't know, I can't even remember. Was that serious a threat? Oh, yes, right. They were going to call FBI witnesses to go into the question of how it was that the Capitol was so poorly secured that day. And everybody who I saw reacting to the threat said, why? What? I don't understand why that's good for you. Like, that doesn't make any sense. As though Democrats had said, let's not prepare to guard the Capitol so that something, blah, 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 then there'll be an insurrection and we can blame Trump for it and impeach him. It was a long walk to try to understand the logic of it. It didn't make much sense, and most people said that would be fantastic. It would be a great idea, as a matter of fact, to ask the FBI, what instruction, if any, did you get from the White House or thereabouts that convinced you that you ought not to provide any additional security to the Capitol complex so that the president would have an easier time. He was the president then, I guess. So that Trump would have an easier time taking over the government and overthrowing the established government and disrupting the transition. I don't know what he thought, was going to be the benefit of that, but I guess we may get a chance to find out next week. All right, well, let's see. In the meantime, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was where I had begun on this. Yes, she took some time out on Instagram yesterday to describe her experiences. And, by all accounts, I didn't get to see very much of it. I did see one segment of video that was circulating. I didn't see the live broadcast, but she's describing essentially what it was like to have been sheltering in her office. And then at some point, there's noise outside and banging on the door, and they have I gather from where I came in that they have no idea who's outside the door. And she is now hiding in the bathroom in her office. And yes, they have those in many of those congressional office buildings. There's a private bathroom in there. And she's hiding inside there and is basically, up against the wall behind the door, which was open, and hiding behind the open door up against the wall. And she can hear someone outside shouting, "Where is she? Where is she?" And she's hiding in there thinking, oh my God, they got in. They finally got in. And, what's going to happen? They're going to come here and they're going to drag me out. I don't know what they're going to do. And she describes hiding in there for, she doesn't even know how long, because time apparently warps in her mind during this frightening experience. And if I understood the story correctly, I came in, obliquely to the telling of the story, saw this random video clip of the thing. I guess she comes out at some point, one of her staffers says to come out, and that the person who's in the office running around shouting, "Where is she? Where is she?" didn't come with the Capitol rioters anyway, but is in fact, turns out to be a Capitol police officer. But I don't know whether he's so freaked out by the situation or what was really worrying her at the time was neither she nor the staff could get a read on this guy as to whether he was there to, check on her safety and or escort her to someplace more secure, or was he one of these cops that turned out to be sympathetic to the attackers and like he was going to drag her out and offer her up as, as sacrifice to try to have them call off the assault? Well, if we give you AOC, will you go away? No one could tell what the hell this guy was up to. And in fact, he is a cop apparently, and he's shouting at her to go to a different building. She didn't want to name the building where they had set up, I guess, some sort of secure facility where various members were sheltering. And I think that was the room from inside which we saw video early on following the attack, in which Marjorie Taylor Greene is among those taking shelter in there with everybody else who are wearing masks, and she refuses to wear the mask. You remember that whole story and how everybody caught COVID from these idiots. But I guess, she didn't want to say which building it was in case, I don't know, I guess it's a permanent part of a permanent plan. You don't want to give away where this location is. But he's yelling at her to go there, but he doesn't take her there. He just screams at her to go, and she runs away and goes, and he offers no protection on the way there. And as a matter of fact, they had to pass, as she's describing it, pass by doors outside of which there's still mobs out there bashing on the door, banging on the door, wanting to get in. It was, I don't know what to tell you. It was really quite, quite excruciating listening to her describe this. And you can't imagine what you must be thinking that moment where she's hiding in there, thinking that a rioter had gotten into her office and was screaming, "Where is she?" And that they would eventually find her, and who knows what happens. And then that weird feeling of, okay, it's a Capitol police officer, but is he a good guy Capitol police officer or a bad guy Capitol police officer? That must have been pretty scary. Anyway, lots of frightening moments there and lots of discussion of what that must have been like. And we're going to need that sort of narrative, I think, as part of the prosecution, really. Oh, yes, now I'm reminded why, or what was it, what stupid mission was it that the so-called Trump lawyer was on the television last night? He was insisting that he would be demanding that no video of the events of January 6th be exhibited during the trial, which I think is kind of a pointless thing. I mean, I don't know why you would tip your hand as to whether you're, worried about that being aired by going out and making this demand that it not be used, because I think it's pretty obvious it will be used, and that the decision on whether or not to allow it to be used is basically going to be up to Democrats, and they're going to make that decision on their own, and that'll be that. So, I don't know. Anyway, I guess in the meantime, between now and then, the key thing will be to keep Democratic senators healthy, masked, as isolated as possible, so that all are available for any necessary votes on procedure or questions of constitutionality or whatever else might crop up in the proceedings, because we're still waiting for Mark Warner to come out of his self-imposed quarantine because he had been around somebody who had tested positive, and he wanted to, do the right thing. And it's wise at this point to make sure you're as healthy as possible for the opening of the trial. We will wait and see how things are going and how they are taking care of themselves, what their self-care routine is in this critical time. I wonder, I saw somebody suggest the other day that perhaps it was Mark Warner's continued quarantine, which might be standing in the way of the fact that, and this is something we can talk to Joan about perhaps, there's still no organizing resolution in the Senate, apparently. And at least in some of the Senate committees, Republicans continue to insist that they hold the chairmanship and the majority on the committees. I think they're working under the variant of the rule, or the other interpretation of the of what ought to be the rule anyway, about continuing service on the committees. I think they're just figuring if you are a returning senator, a re-elected senator, that you just continue in office in your committee assignments with or without a new organizing resolution, based on their interpretation of the instruction at the top of the last organizing resolution, and I guess probably all organizing resolutions, that says that these named members will be members of the committee for the duration of the 116th Congress, which is now over, of course, or until their successors are chosen. And it's a plausible reading, certainly, to say, well, okay, so if you're reelected, you would continue in that slot on the committee until a new organizing resolution says otherwise. But, if you ask me, it's equally plausible to read things a different way, that really applies to members or senators whose terms don't expire. To me, it doesn't make any sense, of course, so we've explained it before. It doesn't make any sense to say that the end of your term and swearing you into a brand new term, and they do insist that you take the oath again and sign the book again, the whole bit. And that the oath is very important, and that you wouldn't have entered upon your service in your new term until you've taken the oath, but that somehow none of that matters for a committee doesn't make any sense. If it matters for the Senate as a whole, I would think it would matter for every sub-unit, I guess, of the Senate, and I don't know why they don't apply it. I think it's mostly because no one has ever spoken up and said, we need a ruling from the parliamentarian on this. I also, I guess it would be nitpicking, but I guess as long as I'm nitpicking, right, that sentence that says your service on the committee will last the duration of the 116th Congress or until your successors are chosen. Well, I mean, right, like we said last time, it doesn't make any sense in the context of senators who didn't run for re-election or who lost their bids for re-election. They're not senators, and they reconcile the two positions by saying, well, their service would continue on the committee if they were still senators, but they're not. It's their having lost or having retired that removes them from the committee. Whereas, like I say, splitting some hairs, I would say, if the language said that your assignment there lasted the duration of the 116th Congress and until your successor is chosen, then it would be pretty clear that your assignment didn't end. Although I still don't know what they would do with defeated senators. You'd still have to exclude them. But the fact that it's or, well, maybe that opens the door to saying, well, your service is at least until the end of the 116th Congress, or until either your successor is chosen because you resigned in office or died in office or asked to leave the committee or were replaced on the committee for some reason. But if it's just a matter of your term ending and you thinking that you should automatically, be able to move on to service on the committee one more time, that I don't think so. I think there you should say, well, you could be your own successor if you're chosen in the next organizing resolution, But other than that, no, you've got no particular claim to the seat on this committee. I mean, everyone may assume you're coming back, but look, all you got to do is pass a simple resolution, and then you'll be back. Why won't you do that? I don't know. So anyway, I guess we'll find out, pardon me, whether there are any plans to, put forward an organizing resolution at any point in the Senate, and see what Joan has heard about that. Over in the House, of course, the organizing resolutions, and they do call them that, although, I don't know, for some reason there's just not as much focus on them there as there is in the Senate. But the organizing resolutions placing members on the committees, of course, did happen. They were adopted last Thursday. On Friday, we spoke about it. We may have hinted at it on Thursday, what they ought to be doing. The big controversy over putting Marjorie Taylor Greene on any committees at all, but in particular the Education Committee, and not as much outcry over the budget for some reason, but whatever. And now lots of petitions and even a new resolution from Democrats purporting to remove her from the committee. I, of course, thought the preferred approach would have been to prevent her from getting onto the committee in the first place, and thereby assure yourself the victory of keeping her off the committee, versus the tougher road, let's say, of trying to dislodge her from the committee. But I understand that Steny Hoyer, Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, made known yesterday that I guess the demand would be put this way. The Democrats were saying, look, the Republicans will be given a chance to take care of their own housekeeping. We're giving them 72 hours for whatever reason, 72 hours up until Wednesday, or I guess Thursday when they finally vote on the thing, before Democrats will, if you haven't fixed it by then, take up a resolution that targets her specifically and removes her from her committee assignments. And so the word is that on Wednesday, the Rules Committee will take up this resolution, which usually means that you would see it on the floor on a Thursday, though they can move it more quickly. But I was I'm interested in the fact that if Democrats are willing to force it themselves, and this was something they could have done the whole time, of course, but if Democrats are going to force it themselves and move their own resolution removing her from committees, then I don't have any idea why they weren't willing or wouldn't have been willing to do the same thing and offer a resolution of their own that simply excluded her from the organizing at all. Why they didn't last Thursday object to the unanimous consent request to pass the Republican organizing resolution, and instead say either, one, we want you Republicans to take responsibility and remove her from the committee by giving us a new organizing resolution that excludes her, or if you refuse to do it, we could hold all of your committee assignments hostage to this demand that she be removed. And, that would light a fire under you. That would create some pressure for you. Or we could offer our own resolution that has everything that's in your resolution except a committee assignment for Marjorie Taylor Greene, and just have you vote on that. You might vote no out of protest, but then fine, bite off your nose to spite your face. You're going to deny yourself committee assignments. What do I care? But, one of the objections to doing things that way was, we can't be the ones offering up a resolution making Republican committee assignment choices for them. Of course, we wouldn't be. We would be copying their choices. But here we are a week later with her on the committee and nothing done about it in the last week. Here we are offering just the same thing, a resolution not naming everybody else to the committees except her, but rather, in this case, just singly mentioning her and removing her. Somehow that's like a comfortable thing to do, whereas something that has the same effect done last Thursday, that's beyond the pale. I don't know. I just don't think that they gave it any particular thought to doing that. I think they found that to be an uncomfortable thing. And I guess in the end, if you land in the same square, that is, with all the rest of the Republican rank and file named to their committees and Marjorie Taylor Greene excluded by the motion of Democrats, then, I don't have much complaint as long as it works. The only problem is, will it work? To me, again, also I figured that the Democratic leadership was saying, well, this way is better because then we get to bash her for a week and hang her around the neck of every Republican. Because eventually, we're going to give the Republicans the chance to do the right thing and they will decline to step up and take responsibility, and then we'll do it for them because it has to be done. To me, I think, well, that's largely the same thing. We certainly could have hung her around their necks if we had forced a vote, like, say, today or tomorrow, on the new resolution that we put forward that names every other Republican to the same committees they were going to be named to, minus her. What's the difference? We have a vote, we ask them to step up, and if they decline to do it, fine, we'll just convene what committees exist and start work. They'll be all Democrats, and we'll do an amazing job of mustering a majority on every single committee. And anyway, I don't know. To me, the idea of taking the risk, one, that Republicans won't do the right thing, not much of a risk, they definitely won't, but why not just get what you were after? You want her off the committee? Object. Done. The end. She's not on any committees. If you want to repair the problem of not having any Republicans on your committee, go ahead and do it. And if you're not embarrassed to move legislation, then it was a perfectly obvious solution right up front. Plus, you lock in the victory from the start. Here we are, begging and pleading. Oh, please. Well, we'll have a special resolution to undo this appointment as opposed to stopping it in the first place. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Many news stories poking their heads up and demanding attention here. But anyway, I think we've recapped things enough. But at some point, we're supposed to be giving the Republicans a chance to do something. Otherwise, we have, in case you're on the lookout for it, I think conveniently enough, as we said, having given the Republicans 72 hours to do the right thing on their own, we are now, as backup, offering House Resolution 72, quite by coincidence, I believe, that they use the same number. The House Rules Committee, according to Scott McFarlane, the reporter for the local NBC affiliate here in D.C., I think, Channel 4, says that House Rules Committee will meet at 3 p.m. tomorrow, Wednesday, on this resolution. And it's a simple resolution. It appears to be like pretty much a one-pager, but basically targeting only Marjorie Taylor Greene. So no such targeting for Lauren Boebert for whatever reason, or for that matter, Devin Nunes, as Marcy Wheeler had suggested. Just not as much public outrage yet generated about those two at this point. So going with the big name that makes the biggest splash instead. Whose resolution is it? Does it say? Do I have the original document here, or can I look it up? The screen grab starts below the name of the sponsoring member, so maybe I'll go and take a look just for fun so we can see who's doing what. There have been, I think, several similar proposals made. I don't know if they've all been submitted in the legislative hopper or not, but let's see, HRES 72. Does it come up even? Yeah, okay, here it is. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the named author on this one. I don't know if anybody's bothering to co-sponsor it because it's just going to move that quickly, but it's in the system now, so you can read it for yourself. It's relatively short, not even a page, I would say. Here we go. Let's see. Whereas Clause 1 of Rule 23 of the Rules of House of Representatives provides a member, delegate, resident commissioner, officer, or employee of the House shall behave at all times in a manner that shall reflect creditably upon the House, or on the House. They don't use upon, the modern usage, on. And whereas Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene should be removed from her committee assignments in light of conduct she has exhibited, now therefore be it resolved that the following member, named member, be and is hereby removed from the following standing committees of the House of Representatives: Committee on the Budget, Mrs. Greene of Georgia, and from the Committee on Education and Labor, Mrs. Greene of Georgia. That's the whole damn thing. It should pass, but I don't know. As resolutions go, it's kind of weak, right? Whereas the Clause 1 of Rule 23 says members of the House shall behave at all times in a manner that shall reflect creditably on the House, and whereas she should be removed for bad behavior, but bad behavior, most of which, the most outrageous of which was, of course, before she was a member of the House, but she hasn't really conducted herself in any upstanding or creditable way, I guess, while a member either. So, whatever. So, they could make legalistic arguments about it, but it'll come down to a question of will Democrats provide a majority of the House in voting for the resolution and thereby pass it? And the answer is probably yes, and that's all the answer you need. Anyway, I guess you could try and sue and say that Rule 23 is inapplicable to most of the things for which they were holding her responsible, but then we'll find out pretty quickly. I think, unless things go haywire and you get a all-Republican, all-Trump panel in the appeals courts, they will just say, yeah, that's just not justiciable, and the House can do those things by majority vote, and that's that. So, anyway, I think that should end it. And if the Rules Committee is meeting on Wednesday, that means likely they will take care of that business on Thursday of this week. Let's see. Speaking of action on the Senate side, as we mentioned earlier, with the impeachment trial set to begin next Tuesday, the 9th, and Trump, by all accounts, about this close to insisting on representing himself. That will be very interesting. We'll see whether that stretches the trial out or whether it compacts it. He could go on at great length about things, mostly which are, ought to be, logically speaking, legally speaking, irrelevant to the nature of the charges he faces in trial, but he could go on and on. I don't know whether it's in his interest or whether he would want to, and sometimes there's a difference between those things. Almost certainly not in his interest to go on and on for weeks, but, he's the kind of person that might think it was fun and interesting or somehow disruptive of Senate practices, and he might be interested in disrupting Senate practice given that, everyone's been worried about the time that won't be spent organizing the Biden administration inside the Senate. He might decide that it's best for him if he stretches things out forever, as long as he can, and as long as Pat Leahy, in presiding over the trial, will tolerate. I don't think he can stretch it out all the way to, I was saying, a good 35 days, good 35 calendar days of trial is about what I would like to see, such that it comes to a close amid everyone's frustration, finally builds to a head, and they cut him off on, I would say, 5 weeks, hence March 15th. I think that having the trial of this traitor come to a conclusion on the Senate floor on the Ides of March is just about perfect. But I don't think he can make it quite that far. I think it'll be over far before then. But hey, wink, wink, wouldn't that be a great answer to everybody's problems? Anyway, moving on. One of the other things that occurred to me in seeing his lawyer of the moment's remarks about the use of video from the insurrection being to his mind out of bounds somehow, even though that will be, I think, the prosecution's case in chief, and there's no use crying about it. As long as we're calling witnesses, let me just add another suggestion to the list. I don't think this is going to help or be taken seriously by the House managers or anything, and it really doesn't need to be. But if for some reason they even wanted, for the sake of argument, which they really don't, to entertain the idea that, all right, Trump is presenting the argument that he legitimately won the election and that it was stolen from him through various trickery, it might be interesting just, I guess if you're forced for whatever reason to entertain that bizarre notion, to add his own pollster to the witness list, given that Politico is reporting today, and I think, or maybe even it was yesterday. Yeah, as a matter of fact, it was dated yesterday. I thought I saw this at some point yesterday. Trump's pollster's campaign autopsy paints damning picture of defeat, which, that would be a point you could bring this person on to make. Oh, yes, the claim of the defendant here, Trump, is that he actually won the election. By your reckoning, and I mean, you're professionally in this game of not only predicting where votes will fall, but tracking where they did fall and explaining the discrepancies, if any. Did Trump win the election? No, he did not. Now, and your position again was what? I was the chief pollster for the Trump 2020 campaign. I see. And you say that he did not win. More than that, though, don't you also say that essentially there was no way he could have won, given how poorly he performed over certain issues and with certain voting demographics? And that's the argument being made here in the article. I would like to see it. It would be interesting to present it, if not at trial, well, and to go over it, on a podcast, for instance. Why don't we do that? Alex Eisenstadt is the writer for Politico who put the piece together. Former President Donald Trump has blamed the election results, which, remember, he lost, and I guess now he's coming to acknowledge that, having established an office of the former president. I think that probably seals the deal. Anyway, former President Donald Trump has blamed the election results on unfounded claims of fraud and malfeasance, but, and this is again why he might be relevant in answering some of these claims, but at the top levels of his campaign, a detailed autopsy report that circulated among his political aides paints a far different and more critical portrait of what led to his defeat. And the main takeaway, really, honestly, that I've seen from it, and I don't mean it as an excerpt from the article. I assume they discussed this at some point, but my main takeaway was the fact that Greg was tweeting this around, Greg Dworkin. Of course, I'm sure we'll want to discuss this tomorrow, tweeting around his own comment on it, that, look, I think what the pollsters discover is he's widely reviled for having either intentionally or accidentally bungled the coronavirus response, and we're going to be burying 500,000 people. And yeah, he should be widely reviled in this country and should never have believed that he had any chance at re-election. Just throwing that out there, that killing 500,000 citizens through incompetence and malfeasance will likely cost you votes. And if you were elected in a close call the first time, you'll probably lose the second time. Anyway, the post-mortem, a copy of which was obtained by Politico, says the former president suffered from voter perception that he wasn't honest or trustworthy, and that he was crushed by disapproval of his handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Or in other words, as Greg always put it, you can talk about it being the economy, et cetera, but in this case, these are extraordinary circumstances. It's the virus, stupid, and you effed it up, so you're going to lose. And while Trump spread baseless accusations of ballot stuffing in heavily black cities, of course, because he's a racist, the report notes that he was done in by hemorrhaging support from white voters. Okay, well, that's a very different story. The 27-page report, which was written by Trump chief pollster Tony Fabrizio, shows how Trump advisors were privately reckoning with his loss, even as the former president and many of his supporters engaged in a conspiracy theory-fueled effort to overturn the election. The autopsy was completed in December of 2020 and distributed to Trump's top political advisors just before President Joe Biden's January 20th inauguration. It is unclear if Trump has seen the report. You would think that would sort of be a requisite, condition here. You're the top pollster to Trump's campaign. He's probably going to see the report. But it's one thing to hand the report over to him. It's another thing to think that he read it. But with this guy, you can't even be sure it was handed over to the president or the ex-president because he is so intellectually incurious and so volatile, according to so many other reports, that probably no one wanted to be the one to hand him the report anyway. You don't want to be the bearer of bad news to Donald Trump. Anyway, the findings are based on an analysis of exit polling in 10 states. 5 of them, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, are states that Trump lost after winning them in 2016. The other 5, Florida, Iowa, North Carolina, Ohio, and Texas, are states that Trump won in both elections. The report zeroes in on an array of demographics where Trump suffered decisive reversals in 2020, including among white seniors, the same group that helped propel him to the White House. The autopsy says that Trump saw the greatest erosion with white voters, particularly white men, and that he lost ground with almost every age group. In the 5 states that flipped to Biden, Trump's biggest drop-off was among voters aged 18 to 29 and 65 and older. In many ways, you might guess the age groups perhaps most affected, really, by the coronavirus and the poor response to it. 65 and older seems clear. 18 to 29. Why? Maybe the youngest, most social and most socially active age cohort, all instead of living their normal lives, living locked down, quarantined lives, and unable to, in many cases, work from home because they're working in jobs in which that's either not possible or they're simply not that established or they're the first ones laid off when the economy turns downward, but they were never inclined to support him in the first place anyway. But very interesting, and we'll leave the balance of the piece and the analysis for Greg to lend his more practiced hand to tomorrow. But I just thought it was interesting in the context of the upcoming impeachment trial. It might be very interesting, if not to call him as a witness, but rather to have this as background in under discussion while Trump is standing there making his case in chief, which is that, no, I really did win, and only by cheating did I appear to lose. Well, also by asking people who they voted for, you also appear to have lost that way as well. All right, let's see. Politico also reporting on the nature of the ultimatum to Republicans over Marjorie Taylor Greene, but, I think we could probably even forgo the details there. You get the idea, so I'll consider that one covered at this point. Let's see. In addition, some good thoughts. Yeah, I don't know how much time do we spend gearing up for the impeachment trial at this point. It's still a week away, but I thought an interesting point, well made, and maybe we can even get to the main idea through the headline. That is to say, maybe they wrote a good headline over at Salon, where Amanda Marcotte has written a piece that has some pop-up video on it that just doesn't want to go away. Not her fault there. Sorry, Republicans, but there's no way to acquit Trump without endorsing his insurrection. Trump's new loyalty test makes it clear, says the subheader. Republicans who vote to acquit are siding with the insurrectionists. And it is odd that non-lawyer Trump insisting on having his own way and arguing what he wants to argue rather than what is at issue in the case, has set up a weird anomaly, a weird paradox here for senators. If they are determined to vote to acquit, they are going to have to do so, one, not having addressed the case in chief against him, and two, saying that they will accept as exculpatory evidence the fact that Donald Trump believes the conspiracy theories that the election was stolen from him, and they will have to endorse it. And furthermore, that there was nothing wrong with having sent people to the Capitol to storm it and overtake it. It's his First Amendment right to ask them to do that. And if you're going to acquit in the face of that line of defense, I think you're just going to be stuck wearing it around your neck. So she, well, let's see. We'll give out some of her more coherent and previously thought out ideas on this as opposed to my winging it off the cuff. For weeks now, Republicans in Congress have been playing a rhetorical game regarding the impeachment of Donald Trump on charges, for which he is quite obviously guilty, of inciting an insurrection. On the one hand, Senate Republicans want very badly to acquit Trump, even though this would allow him to run for office again, believing that the Republican voting base is more loyal to Trump than they are to the Republicans or to the nation itself. On the other hand, they don't want to come right out and say that Trump was justified in sending a violent crowd to storm the Capitol on January 6th. That sort of overtly fascist stance can hurt one's bookings on cable news shows. Apparently not so far. And can cause corporate donors to put you out on ice for a cycle. That so far appears to be holding up. So, Senate Republicans glommed onto what they thought was the perfect strategy to have it both ways. Pretend they are springing Trump on a technicality. Last week, in a vote called by Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, 45 out of 50 Senate Republicans voted affirmatively on the claim that it's unconstitutional to hold an impeachment trial for Trump now that he's out of office. We know about that. Impeachment is for removal from office, and the accused here has already left office, Paul argued, clearly imagining himself a true artiste of hair splitting, or really just reading off of Jonathan Turley's script. Senate Republicans want to maintain a position as Schrodinger's insurrectionists, neither for or against Trump's attempted coup, but Trump was never a man with a taste for the politically useful equivocacy and has a special loathing for Republicans who aren't enthusiastic enough about the terrible and illegal things he likes to do. So it's unsurprising that Trump looks like he's going to make life very difficult for Senate Republicans by leaning away from the technicality arguments and pushing for his lawyers to simply defend his actions in attempting to overthrow the legally elected government. That will make it difficult, don't you think? All right. Well, anyway, perhaps we can return to that as we get closer to the election, although I think we'll probably be overwhelmed by events and new writing on the same topic. But something to keep in mind while you're framing things up in your mind a week out from the event itself. Let's see. Another small bit of news here. Let's see. I saw it first in the tweets of Justin Rohrlich, who is a reporter, yes, ex-courts staff apparently. Says he's got bylines or has had bylines in Daily Beast and FP. What's FP? Foreign Policy, I guess. Vice News and others. I guess doing things freelance these days. And his scoop, this time in the Daily Beast, is about the Wisconsin pharmacist who sabotaged those 500 doses of the Moderna coronavirus vaccine. You recall that this is the guy who left it out of the refrigerator intentionally, and they were speculating that he was hoping to, I guess, either disprove the efficacy of the vaccine or vaccines in general, perhaps. Weird, right? Well, it turns out it's worse than that. The long story short on this is in the tweet here. He also believes the Earth is flat and that the sky is actually a shield put up by the government of all people. I'm sure the sky predates the government of the United States, but hey, it's a shield put up by the government. Why? To prevent individuals and groups, presumably, from seeing God, because otherwise he'd just be plainly visible. He, she, whatever. I don't know what kind of sort of word. I heard an interesting version of how to deal with the gender neutrality of God at some point. But it only works in, I don't know, what's the technical terminology, the grammatical terminology for referring to somebody this way. Speaking of either God, rather than saying God himself or God herself, the phrasing was God, God's self. Interesting, you know. It's a narrow usage. You only need it in one case. Handy, easy to remember. I just thought that was kind of interesting. Pops into mind here. Now, are there more details in this article which could possibly surprise us, or did the tweet really sum it up? Justin offers a couple other things here. Let's see. The guy's name, Stephen Brandenburg, not only a flat earther, but apparently a believer in the idea that for some reason the sky is a shield to prevent individuals, and again, I have to assume groups as well, but this is the way they've put it, from seeing God. I imagine if you banded together, you still could not see through the shield. Really, what else is there to know at this point? I'm just going to sort of skim through there. Is there anything that hasn't been put in the tweet? Let's see. The warrant application filed in federal court by FBI Special Agent Lindsay Schlomer reveals that Brandenburg's delusions went far beyond doubting the reality of the coronavirus. Not only did Brandenburg insist the microchipped vaccine, another one of those guys, would, quote, turn off people's birth control and make others infertile, so a little bit of both on that one. He was convinced that the physical world around him was not what it seemed, a coworker told investigators. Some of the conspiracy theories Brandenburg told the coworker about included the Earth is flat. You think that's a conspiracy theory? Do people need to band together to make the Earth flat? It just is flat. I mean, we don't know what else to call it. It's a dumb theory, but I don't think it involves any conspiracy necessarily. The sky is not real. Rather, it's a shield put up by the government. That's more of a conspiracy, I suppose. And Judgment Day is coming, which a lot of people have thought for a long time, and I don't think it really required any particular conspiracy, but they were all being taught that it was coming, so maybe there's something to that. Anyway, some of the conspiracy theories Brandenburg told the coworker about included all this junk, and the coworker, identified in the document as a pharmacy technician, in case you were interested, by the name of Sarah Sticker, she told authorities that Brandenburg carried a .45 caliber handgun to work, which he said he needed, quote, in case the military came to take him away. Wow. And everybody just worked with him. Like, sure, here's medications for people. And you might think about taking a couple of them yourself, but we trust you for some reason. Cops seized several firearms in Brandenburg's home on New Year's Eve. Sticker, who is reportedly the one that discovered the vaccines that Brandenburg removed from the refrigerator on December 24th and 25th, told investigators that Brandenburg then tried to guilt trip her after she turned him in. If I lose this job, I lose my kids, Brandenburg allegedly told Sticker, who said she feared Brandenburg was becoming desperate or unhinged. Imagine working with the guy, like during the time before they just like scoop him up and take him away, knowing how crazy he is and that he's armed and that he blames you for losing his, maybe losing his job and maybe losing his kids at Christmas. I'd be more worried about, the bullet tripping than the guilt tripping, but apparently that didn't enter her mind, or at least not her description. So I don't know. Maybe he's just that kind of guy. Anyway, interested in more about how crazy he is in particular, you can check out the Daily Beast story and read further into it. We're going to move on, and it's almost break time anyway for the top of the hour. So perhaps moving on to a few other items instead. Let's see. Some filibuster discussion that we can save for after the break and perhaps follow up on it with Joan when we hear from her in the last segment. And let's see, a couple of good calls. Oh, yes, we can at least mention the Washington Post call for going ahead with the trial in the Senate and not worrying about whether or not it is going to be a distraction. In fact, the headline here from Paul Waldman's piece in the Plum Line from a couple of days ago, memo to Democrats, Trump's trial won't be a distraction. Do it right. And you'll never guess. They do eventually get around to the idea of holding a trial in a committee instead. And this brilliant idea, I believe, is credited instead to Norm Ornstein, which is something that happens all the time, even when I actually tell these things directly to Greg Sargent. He is usually pretty clear in saying, okay, well, that's all very interesting, and I understand that it's probably true. I now need to find a name brand expert who will tell me that they also think it's true, and then we'll credit that idea to them, and then people will read it and say, aha, it's a real idea, as opposed to saying, podcaster David Waldman says that this is the case, even though podcaster or blogger or what have you, David Waldman, usually gives you these ideas a couple years in advance, and then everybody else realizes that this is how it actually works. And but even then, they usually need to attach it to a brand name pundit instead. What can I tell you? There's only so much value that the ability to say, yeah, well, that's what you said. You say that isn't the way it works. But that's what you said about the filibuster and changing the effect, anyway, of the rules on the filibuster. And you said that to me for years and years, and I insisted to you, no, that actually is not the way it works. And then it turned out I was right. And it's happened on a couple of occasions with a couple of different procedural rules. And what are you just going to say? The guy who gets around, I don't know, the octopus who predicts the Super Bowl gets better press on this than I do. I'm not certain why that is. Need more arms, I guess. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yeah, not certain why it is. Octopuses get better PR. They get have better flax, I guess. The groundhog and his weather predictions gets coverage every year. Me, no, not so much. Anyway, I don't know what to tell you. Do you want to read it? I don't know. I don't think we learn anything from this. He's right. It's great that Paul Waldman is doing this. Paul's no relation here, so it's okay to say so. He should be writing it. And quite honestly, my chief concern really is that people come to believe this. And if telling them that Norm Ornstein says it's true, that's, fine with me for the time being. This despite the fact that the octopi and groundhogs get more respect out of their ridiculous predictions that might not be based on anything than I do. All right, well, sad. Anyway, point is, he's quite right. There's no reason to believe that it needs to be a distraction, and it'll be interesting to see if they never come around to using a committee on this. Especially if Trump tries to drag things out. It's pretty odd that they wouldn't decide to at least threaten this early on. Greg Sargent, likewise, I guess, comes around to this, or unless he's referring to, no, I thought he might be referring to Paul's piece here, because it often, and in fact this one did, run under the Plum Line banner here. But Greg Sargent went with a different expert on this one. Let's see, when was he tweeting this? This is also from yesterday. Greg tweeting, update, I just talked to John Dean, who endorsed the idea of a Senate impeachment committee. Dean says this would allow for the Senate to do legislative business while also taking the time to develop a record of one of history's greatest travesties. And I guess referring to his own write-up of that interview in the Washington Post, which is, I guess, a follow-up to his piece that he had tweeted earlier. Are Democrats really worried about a Trump trial? Here's an answer, which is to say, to go with the committee idea. And equally interesting in all this, one, And no mention of my having brought this up, but what can you do? But as I said, also very interesting in all of this is the comment from Armando, who's tweeting, yes, this is the way to do it, to have the committee handle things. Now, this is interesting, too. This is the way, he says, and then he says, I invented that. And that is really amazing. I don't know whether he's joking or he's just become so personally wrapped up in it that it feels like he invented that. Or maybe he did come up with it in his own mind. My recollection, of course, is that we discussed this several weeks ago, and I said, they can just do this in committee. Oh, yeah? Okay, that's a great idea. They should totally do that. Or maybe, I don't remember it correctly, it might have been like, yes, of course they could do it by committee. I totally knew that, and I've been saying that for weeks. But anyway, I invented inventing, so at least I get credit for that. Or unless someone wants to say an octopus did it, or Norm Ornstein, or John Dean. Between Norm and John, they have 4 arms. That's at least half as good as an octopus, and I guess we'll have to accept that. Anyway, guess what? They can use a committee. This is not news to you, but I'm excited to be able to tell you that that's the truth now. Not because I read the history of how the Senate has handled impeachments in the past, but because John Dean and Norm Ornstein have read it, and they say it's okay. So we'll base it on something solid instead. How about that? All right, let's see. This was an interesting story covered over at Daily Kos in the Community Diaries by Sem Dem, who writes this very interesting piece with an intriguing headline. Trump's biggest advocate for election fraud, that is to say, the biggest advocate of his election fraud theory, now refuses to an audit of her own election after a major error was discovered in this election. It was not a public elected official. It is the chair of the Republican Party in Arizona, one of the craziest of the statewide chairs that's yet out there running around free and hasn't been scooped up yet for the with the guys with the white suits and the nets. Kelly Ward in Arizona. Not many people, the piece begins, can name the chair of their state's political party, much less the chair of another state's. Yet Kelly Ward, Kelly with an I, in case you were wondering, a perennial losing Senate candidate, is well known across the land as chair of the Arizona Republican Party, and that's not a good thing. Kelly Ward was wacky before the GOP plunged into QAnon town, at one time just a conspiracy-laden fringe joke. She was best known for holding town halls on chemtrails, you know all about them, hanging out with the Bundys, and being a fierce defender of racist speech. How fun. Yet now, the rest of the Republican Party has caught up with her. So, she was elected to lead the Arizona GOP, and she has not disappointed. She told anti-maskers to dress like healthcare workers when they protest. She asked her fellow state Republicans if they would be willing to commit to dying for Trump, because that's normal. These are all her past escapades linked to sources of that information. But I remember, the idea that anti-maskers should dress up in scrubs and say they were nurses and healthcare practitioners when asked by reporters. That was supposed to somehow lend additional credence to their anti-mask position. But instead it just made them sound like nurses who should be fired. Whatever. When insurrectionists stormed the Capitol and someone did die, however, died for Trump, right? She blamed outside agitators. Oh yes, it was Antifa, right? She also thought this would be a good time for the Arizona State Party to censure the 3 most popular Republican political figures in the state. Former Senator Jeff Flake, John McCain's widow, Cindy McCain, and Governor Doug Ducey for the crime of refusing to support Trump's efforts to overthrow the election. And I believe they did go ahead with those 3 censures. In other censure news, I believe that the South Carolina Republican Party in the last couple of days has censured, what's his name? The one Republican congressman from, I think, the Myrtle Beach area, who went along with the vote on impeachment in the House and has since found himself on the other end of a censure resolution. I think this is the tweet that has the news in it. Yes, from CNN anchor Ana Cabrera, noting on January 30th, just in, South Carolina GOP formally censures Congressman Tom Rice for voting to impeach Trump for inciting an insurrection. So just another note in that column. Now back to the story of Kelly Ward. Anyway, she was all about election integrity, in scare quotes, right? Election integrity, she said, but she didn't think that would be thrown back in her face quite so soon. Another one of those life comes at you fast stories. Kelly Ward was challenged for the state chair by numerous people, including Sergio Arellano, a small business owner in Tucson who lost his congressional bid during the 2018 blue wave. With Trump's backing, Ward won, barely, with just 42 votes to spare, I guess here. Just as with just 42 votes. I imagine there were more votes for her, but the margin was perhaps 42 votes. Anyway, Trump did go out of his way to make an endorsement all the way from Pervalago on her behalf. And I guess it worked, but only barely. Okay, so returning to the story here, however, doubts began to emerge when one of the announced winners for another race, a committee member from the 8th Congressional District, was falsely told that she had lost her race. Kelly Ward attributed this error to a human error, attributed this anomaly. The four challengers for the chair then asked Ward for an audit of all the ballots. And in the words of Arellano, and I'm guessing that's the pronunciation of his name, this isn't about the chairman's race. This is about election integrity. I guess so once you've figured out that there was just some mathematical errors going on here in at least one of the races for congressional district representative, you figure, well, let's recount everything and make sure there were no mathematical errors in any of the races. But apparently that, might possibly threaten Kelly Ward's election, given that she won with such a slim margin. So Ward should have been all over that, since those were very similar words, similar to the words that she used when demanding an audit of the Arizona's presidential results. There's a couple of minor typos in the piece here, Semdem, sorry to say, so I'll have to correct them on the fly. Yet, in a video response to all the challengers and doubters who wanted an audit of her race for chair, Kelly Ward told them there would be no such thing, and they could go pound salt, which is frequently sand in many retellings of the story. These are the final results of the election, apparently with 2 exclamation points, and seen. This was done without a hint of irony. Ward spent months alleging widespread voter fraud with no evidence, and even asked if people were willing to die to overthrow the election. But an audit for her own race? Get out of here. Trey Terry is the treasurer of the GOP in the legislative district chaired by Sandra Dowling. She's the one who was originally declared the winner in her race, then told she actually had lost. Terry was livid and wasn't having it. And I guess tweeted, lots of evidence piling up that the Arizona GOP elections and resolutions last Saturday were fraudulent. People who were announced as winners are now being told they actually lost, while vote totals have yet to actually be given. Also tweeting multiple flagrant violations of bylaws, meeting rules not being followed, vote counting errors, vote switching as well. Fox question mark at the end of that one. All this from the band that brought you such hits as Stop the Steal and Election Integrity, both hashtag there. It's bad enough for the Republicans to have a civil war going on in their national party, but Kelly Ward is ensuring they have one at the state level in a critical battleground state. Arizona has a governor's race in 2022. It's another chance for the Democrats to take the state legislature. Arizona has shown the last two cycles that it is turning blue. Biden won it for the Democrats for the first time since 1948, and both senators are now Team Blue, marginally. Maricopa County, the largest, always red, but things have been changing rapidly there. Some links to information making that claim provided as well. This is one state where the GOP really needs their A game, but they brought Q instead. I like that phrasing. Expect Ward to watch her party lose all the important races of 2022 and instantly declare fraud with no evidence. I promise you that'll happen, and not every outlet, or rather every outlet not named Fox or OAN, will likely begin their interviews with her with something along the lines of, but going back to your race in 2021, she is really the best candidate we could have hoped for. So, okay, very interesting. And I guess an update here also to the story, now provided with a hat tip to Skohaze in the comments for showing me this tweet. Semdem says the line, quote, "You certainly don't allow a challenger who lost an election to demand something they don't have the right to. Gets me every time." What does that mean? It's this tweet from Yvonne Wingjet Sanchez, who says, there'll be no Arizona GOP election audit. Kelly Ward said there's no procedure, process, or rule that allows for it to be done, and, here's the line, right? You certainly don't allow a challenger who lost an election to demand something that they don't have the right to, and we don't have the responsibility for providing. Sounds like something that could easily have been said about the loser of the presidential election, demanding things that he didn't have a right to. But, as we say, irony is dead. All right. A few other comments here added as updates to the piece. Our own Dave in Arizona is secretary of the, see if we pronounce, is it Cochise Democratic Party, as well as state committee member. He pointed out that the Arizona Republican General Meeting was held in a super spreader event at a mega church. Yay! Whereas the Dems did it via Zoom. He also pointed out that the Democratic state chair is Raquel Terran, a native of the border town of Douglas, Arizona in Cochise County. No conspiracies, no asking people to sacrifice themselves for Biden, no civil war. Just a very competent individual focusing on winning elections. Oh, and she said she would be happy to provide an audit of her election if requested. So there you have it. One of the other differences between our two parties. So there is a dime's worth of difference, at least, between the two. All right, let's see. Other fun and interesting topics. How about an update before we get to speaking to Joan that might lay the groundwork for discussion about what's going on with the budget and reconciliation, just so that she doesn't have to spend all her time trying to explain what's going on, although I also don't want to eat up like her topic here either. I'm not certain how she wants to approach the issue today. But a roll call piece here entitled "Sweeping Budget Blueprint for Pandemic Aid Readied for Floor Action." I think we do need to spend some time straightening this out. There's been a lot of talk about reconciliation. And not enough, I don't think, talk about, okay, well, what is it that enables reconciliation to be used in the first place? And so the quick reminder is, in order to enjoy the benefits of the reconciliation process, which helps you bypass the filibuster, or rule out the filibuster, and thereby enact policy with a simple majority only. In order to do that, you have to follow the prescribed procedure. In other words, the budget resolution for the upcoming fiscal year has got to have included in it reconciliation instructions. In other words, I guess the best way of putting it in the most simple terms is you have to declare ahead of time that you're going to be using your reconciliation option in order for it to work. It's like, calling your shot in pool, right? So that you can make sure that everybody knows that that's your intention, especially if you're going to be using like rail shots and combination shots that might otherwise, if I remember the rules of how we played anyway, otherwise using an undeclared combination might you get the credit for sinking the ball, but you don't get to retain the honors to shoot again immediately afterwards if people suspect that you used this combination by accident. Anyway, so you're declaring ahead of time, we're going to use reconciliation, and here it comes, and here are the conditions under which we'll use it. And there are 3 instances set out in the Budget Act where all this nonsense comes from for ways that you can use reconciliation. You can use it for balancing tax revenues and adjusting tax revenues and collection. You can use it for enacting policy that has a direct budget impact. You can use it for adjusting the debt ceiling. Very rarely used for that, but I forget how it's explained in the Budget Act precisely. But anyway, that too is coming up, and reminding people who have gotten used to our use of omnibus reconciliation bills. We have come away with the impression that isn't entirely true, that reconciliation is something that can only be used once a year. That's been the practical outcome for most years that reconciliation's been used, only because we've ended up passing one omnibus reconciliation bill. That is, if you have reconciliation instructions for any of the 3 available, I think it's 3, available purposes for reconciliation, and you instruct several committees to act on them, they then like to bring them all together and lump them into one bill, that's omnibus, and just have the one reconciliation fight and reconciliation vote rather than do it 2 or 3 times. But you can absolutely keep the bills separate and do it that way. So that's one way in which you might, without changing any rules, see more reconciliation bills voted on in a single year than just one. And also, there are various other tricks which might become relevant this time around, which include, 1, the fact that reconciliation instructions are supposed to be used for not in a calendar year, but in the fiscal year for which you're working. And remember, the government's fiscal year begins on October 1st and ends on September 30th. So we sometimes get confused about that, and you might see in the same calendar year 2 omnibus reconciliation bills, one dealing with instructions for fiscal year 2020 and one dealing with fiscal year 2021 or 21 and 22, depending. So, the calendar year isn't what's operative here, it's the fiscal year. And there's even another twist now being floated, which we saw from Congressman McGovern, wasn't it? The chairman of the House Budget Committee discussing something about utilizing reconciliation instructions and then rescinding those instructions once the reconciliation bill had passed, and then reissuing new reconciliation instructions. And I really have no idea what that might have been about and how you would structure such a thing. So I'm very curious to watch how things might happen this way. But it's affecting a lot of the discussion in terms of strategery about pushing democratic and progressive priorities through the use of reconciliation. So a lot of the discussion out there is, well, you only have one shot at reconciliation, so we have to make a choice as to whether we're going to use it for COVID relief or the Green New Deal, for instance. And then there's arguments then break out and say, well, we'll definitely need it for this one. No, we'll need it for the other one. Or others say, well, why don't we try and put together a bipartisan deal that doesn't need to use reconciliation for COVID relief, thereby reserving the ability to use reconciliation for the Green New Deal. And it doesn't, for various reasons, doesn't actually necessarily work that way. certainly if there's anything to this substance of the idea, or any substance to the idea of that reconciliation instructions can then be rescinded and reissued, well, that opens up a whole new avenue that I've never seen discussed anywhere, and I may just be misunderstanding what it is he's talking about here. But also, of course, if you're willing to push your parliamentarian and push your caucus to stick together and vote as a strict majority to either overrule the parliamentarian or bend the rules as necessary, then I guess you could shoehorn in both COVID relief and at least some parts of a Green New Deal or whatever. But yeah, there's also, of course, the problem of the bird rule and whether or not, whether you would leave it to be enforced unchanged or unchallenged is another question. And if you were to leave it standing and in place, well, how much of your Green New Deal would survive scrutiny under the bird rule? So, that's one thing that some folks have never really gotten the hang of. Some of that is the fault of those of us who remind everybody that, well, with 51 votes, you can do pretty much whatever you want if you feel up to it. That has warped people's view of things. We'll see what their plans are and how far they're willing to push things. The roll call article I have here, Sweeping Budget Blueprint for Pandemic Aid Readied for Floor Action, reminds us that the budget resolution comes first. And the measure, it says, would set the stage for quick movement on President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief plan, bypassing, of course, the Senate filibuster. Paul Krozak reporting here just the other day, the 29th of January, for roll call on this. Democrats on Monday, that was yesterday, will kick off a convoluted process. It is, I think, they're right, to try to pass President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID-19 rescue package through a budget resolution that would direct 24 House and Senate committees to draft pieces of filibuster-proof reconciliation bill. Pieces of a bill, which I guess would be an omnibus bill in the end. The effort promises to be the most wide-ranging budget reconciliation measure since 1993, when President Bill Clinton in his first year signed a sweeping deficit reduction package passed by a Democratic Congress with policy components written by 25 committees. The contents were still in flux as of Friday night, but the current plan calls for 11 Senate committees and 13 House panels to receive instructions to develop pieces of the aid package, which the budget would cap at $1.9 trillion over a decade. One noticeable absence from the list of Senate committees, which generally line up with similar panels of jurisdiction in the House, is Energy and Natural Resources. By contrast, the House Energy and Commerce Committee would receive an instruction, according to sources briefed on the proposal. The Biden plan would provide $5 billion in aid to low-income households and pay energy bills this winter, but is otherwise bereft of energy-related items. However, once a panel receives reconciliation instructions, how it hits the budget targets is up to them. And such flexibility means it's possible that House Democrats could push for other climate change-related legislation to be part of the package. Giving incoming Senate Energy and Natural Resources Chairman Joe Manchin a similar directive could put him at risk politically, as his home state of West Virginia is the nation's second largest coal producer and is ranked 6th for natural gas production, according to the Energy Information Administration. Even though the budget resolution doesn't specify what legislative changes should be made, Republicans could turn Manchin's vote into a talking point. Manchin is one of the most closely watched Democrats, if not the most closely watched, in the year's upcoming legislative battles in a Senate divided 50-50. West Virginia voters backed former President Donald Trump by 39 points last year, and Manchin's no vote would or could sink Democratic bills if he considers them too far to the left. And as a practical matter, if Republicans offered an amendment to strike an Energy and Natural Resources instruction, it would have to go to the House for a revote. Leaving it out to begin with would avoid such a result while preserving flexibility for House and Senate negotiators to use the House energy and commerce instructions for the coronavirus aid package. Manchin could always vote against the final bill if Democrats insert any unrelated anti-fossil fuel provisions. All right. That music, of course, means it's time for our third and final break, after which we'll be in the final segment of the show and hope to hear from Joan McCarter and sorting some of this stuff out. I can sift through it a little bit more and see what other details might be brought up, but that might already be on Joan's agenda. We'll find out when we return. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you.
But they're well, they haven't
Fair
officially set up two. We've seen rumors that they are.
Okay, well, we're back now, so we can just begin our discussion at this point. Just chatting with Joan McCarter, who now joins us for this final segment, and puzzling through reconciliation. And I was doing my best to use the previous segment to remind everybody, the rules on it are never entirely clear, and they seem to change quite often. And I guess maybe the rarity of use of reconciliation, although you hear about it every year lately, there's just not a lot of, nobody has a lot of experience working with reconciliation because you only tend to see it once a year. And therefore, one of the weird conclusions that people come away with is that you can only have one reconciliation bill in a year. And I was trying to explain in the last segment, no, that's not really the way it works. It's the way it's come out a lot of times because they lump several potential separate standalone reconciliation bills together into one because it's a tough slog. Even though you only need to get a majority vote, reconciliation debate goes on for quite a while. Like the budget resolution before it, it's time limited and so therefore not subject to the filibuster, but it also turns into the, like a fire hydrant of amendments, and the vote-a-rama that you see on budget resolutions sometimes replicates itself in the reconciliation debate. And so it's something you only want to do once a year probably, but you can do several. And you're saying this year they're thinking of two right from the get-go?
Well, I've only seen rumors of it. I probably shouldn't be so forceful in saying they're doing it. I have seen talk that they're maybe thinking about doing it, and I'm not sure what the second thing would be. So
but
they're definitely thinking about flexing that muscle to the maximum that they can.
Okay, so lots of inventive thought anyway about how they would handle it. I see here the next section of the roll call article that I was looking at points out that, so the first move here is House Budget Chair John Yarmouth plans to begin the process by releasing a fiscal 2021 budget resolution on Monday. That would have been yesterday. I don't know if he got around to it, but probably. This, according to sources familiar with the planning, this would be what he's calling a skinny budget resolution, not like a skinny budget, but really, I would say, maybe the best term for it, and maybe I'm doing it accurately here, say it's budget in name only, in a way. You can just say, well, this budget isn't necessarily the entirety of the federal budget for the upcoming fiscal year, but it is that part of the budget which will deal with COVID-19 relief, at the very least.
Right.
So, so part of a budget, there can be a budget, right? You can do if you want to break the budget up into 10 pieces, I guess there's no reason why you couldn't do it. They don't ordinarily do it, but here they will. And because it's a budget bill, I guess you can put reconciliation instructions in it. So that's what they're going to do.
Yes. Yes.
Done.
And in fact, they are going to vote on the rule for that in the House tonight.
Aha. Okay. So well along the way.
Yes.
All right. Well, that sounds fun.
And in addition to that, yesterday, Schumer and Pelosi filed their joint budget resolution.
Okay.
That gives them the basis for the reconciliation instructions.
Okay. So that's...
so there we are.
All right. Well, I guess that's fine. And they'll be at least meeting the bare bones of the rules here. It says here, mentions also what's going on the Senate side, where incoming budget chair, and I guess still not there yet, because still waiting on those organizing resolutions. But Bernie Sanders.
I'm still wondering what's going on with the resolution, the organizing resolution. I've poked at Schumer's staff and have not gotten a good answer.
Okay.
It's possible, as you were speculating earlier, that they don't have everybody there because of quarantining, so they don't feel like they can. One person I chat with periodically who works for Warren believes that there's been some back and forth on committee assignments, that they haven't been able to completely nail those down. And maybe today, I've heard. Okay. I really don't understand why there isn't a fire being lit under these people to get that done.
Yes, I am not sure.
Because, like, we don't have an attorney general right now, and there hasn't even been a hearing. And this was kind of embarrassing on Durbin's part yesterday, sending out this pleading letter to Lindsey Graham to say, please schedule the hearing. That was kind of irritating. I think Durbin probably did it in an attempt to say, look, these guys are messing around and delaying. But what it looked like was him pleading, saying, please do this. And it was embarrassing, I thought.
Yeah, I could see what you mean on that one. And I guess he probably thought it would, I don't know, that it would
publicly
look worse
embarrass Graham? I don't.
Maybe because it's Merrick Garland again, and they're saying you're supposed to be embarrassed. Look what you keep doing to Merrick Garland, even though you guys keep saying he's a good candidate either for the court or for attorney general, but yet you won't schedule anything. But, I don't know. You're right. Whenever you're, calling on somebody to do something that they just then don't do, it is a little pathetic sometimes.
Well, when it should be,
Yeah.
He should be the one making this hearing happen.
Yes.
Democrats do have the nominal majority.
Right. So, all right. Well, we'll see whether they move on that at some point soon today. I don't know. Yeah, I guess there's just no word, and maybe it's just a combination of things that's keeping them from doing it, whether it's absences or trying to work out the last details of committee assignments or, not.
And it was almost, 2 weeks ago that they decided that the filibuster thing wasn't actually going to happen? Was it that long ago?
Oh, the filibuster of the organizing resolution? Yeah, it might have been. Yeah, maybe a little over a week. I do feel like we discussed it last time that they said it wasn't going to, he had dropped
that McConnell caved. McConnell caved last Monday, I think.
Yeah, maybe that's about right.
Yeah. Time, again, is just not a real thing.
Yeah, right. Well, okay. So let's see. And, there's next week we'll have impeachment, I guess, to talk about. It'll be the first day of the actual trial portion of things.
Next week we'll have impeachment, but I kind of want to talk about COVID relief a little bit more.
Yeah. Oh, no, yeah. I'm not ready for impeachment just yet. Please, let's do it.
I think the confusion with reconciliation is that there's confusion because it's a complicated process. but also because you can kind of make up the rules as you go along if you're the Senate.
Yes.
And which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking between Sanders and Schumer, they have a good enough understanding of how they can do that. I hope, at any rate.
Yeah.
With Reid, you knew that Reid had every trick covered. I hope it's true of Schumer and Sanders, but I don't think that they would be putting this much effort into it if they didn't feel like they could get it done, even including the $15 minimum wage hike.
Okay. I think we can make that happen.
So there's that side.
All right.
And then and this is very fun, the outcome of the meeting last night Biden had with Republican senators.
Oh, yeah. How did that go? I didn't check.
It went very well for Biden.
Okay.
This quote particularly just sort of shocked me. This was coming from John King on CNN.
Yeah, all right.
He came out of it saying, "We've got the question backwards. The question is whether Republicans will come up with enough to make it worthwhile for Joe Biden to keep negotiating."
Oh, yes.
It's on the Republicans. It's not on Biden.
Well, it
and
should be.
Somehow by having this meeting with them, that's the narrative that came out of it. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Jen Psaki, the press secretary for Biden, released a very strong statement after the meeting saying that thanks for coming. We appreciate your interest, but this is what we're doing, and we're happy to have you join us, essentially.
Yes. Well,
we're not going to slow this down, and we're not going to do an inadequate package. So,
all right.
Thanks for playing along. Essentially, was the statement. It's fantastic, and it's coming out of it. We're getting the kind of reporting that you saw from John King.
Pretty good. I mean,
and he also got a nice statement out of Susan Collins.
Oh,
which
really? All right.
Yeah, it was a very good exchange of views. She said.
Oh, well, that's deeply concerning.
What we did agree to do is follow up and talk further. Which,
all right,
fine. You can talk to him all you want, Susan Collins.
Yeah.
What they were doing was really, I have characterized as a Trojan horse sent by McConnell. Because it had, with the exception of his liability immunity, which I think is finally dead.
Okay, good.
It had a lot of hallmarks of McConnell, including no additional aid to state and local governments.
Yes.
I think this was McConnell sending Collins up, his favorite water carrier, to push the bipartisan buttons, to appeal to Biden's calls for unity, to his nostalgia for the Senate, to that old collegiality, and, try to get him to slow down or consider cuts or try to make them happy, whatever. And it's not working this time.
Well, all right. I mean, I would imagine it would be a tough thing to do. I mean, everybody's pretty agitated about it having taken so long to even get to this point, and we're still several weeks from actually, having anybody receive any relief of any kinds that would be established under this bill. So the idea of delaying at this point, and of course, eventually, I guess I've never really learned to hope that eventually you really would get the framing and coverage that you deserve for things like this. But I'm glad to see it at least started to happen with John King. But yeah, I mean, essentially the bare bones breakdown of it is the Democratic bill would help a lot more people in a lot more ways. And Republicans are saying, well, if you want us to help you, the bill has to help a lot fewer people in a lot fewer ways.
Yes.
Wow. All right. I mean, that seems like a losing argument. Are you sure you want to have, we can have a meeting and you can come and present that argument to me, but not going to work. And, then they sort of resorted to, well, if you're using reconciliation, that itself is a problem because it won't be bipartisan. But I'm looking around for the rule that says
it can be bipartisan. There's nothing at all stopping Republicans from joining in and voting for it.
It's true.
Biden's argument is that this is the fastest way to do it.
Yeah. Right. Sure. I mean, they ought to frame it that way too. Like, forget the fact that there's no filibuster. I mean, it's related to this. The reason there's no filibuster is because it's time limited. But I mean, right, I think that's a good framing too. We're bringing it to the floor under a procedure that limits debate to, what is it for reconciliation? Like 25 hours. And the budget is 50, so we're plenty of discussion. There's going to be lots of votes. There's going to be a vote-a-rama and everything, and people will be working around the clock. What's your problem? You got every opportunity in the world to amend this thing. The problem is that you are coming to us with an idea that says, let's help fewer people in fewer ways, and that's unpopular. Sorry.
Yes, and guess what? We just won the Senate on bigger help for more people.
Yes. Right. And of course, that brings its own problems of fights over how much did we say we were going to do or what. I still haven't.
Yeah, I still do wish he would come up to $2,000, and I do wish it was not income capped. I mean, there's an argument that I've seen people starting to make that I've been screaming about on Twitter for weeks. They're still basing this on 2019 income.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
and then Biden's cutoff is $75,000 for an individual, $150,000 for a couple. I think there are probably a lot of people who made $75,000 in 2019 and did not make that much in 2020 because there was a pandemic.
Yeah,
so that's still a problem. But there's a lot of other assistance behind that in Biden's package that's very strong and will help sort of make up for that. Okay. Even though I do wish he'd gone that extra mile.
Yeah.
But what we are seeing that is really something I appreciate hugely is lessons learned by Democrats. That
I think I know what you
don't delay to go chasing after potential Republican votes.
Yeah.
Like we did in 2009 on both the Great Recession response and on Obamacare. Mm-hmm. And that you go big. You do what you need to do and don't be scared of the price tag.
Yes. That seems like a good lesson too. And the idea that, well, we'll do this for this round and then come back to it if necessary. Well, we learned that just immediately in the last round of COVID relief. No, Republicans don't let you get back to doing what you need to do. They distract you with everything else. So it's kind of, you got to pretend it's a one-shot thing. And if it's not, then great, tinker with it later. But the idea that you can definitely come back and make up the difference doesn't seem to work. And the idea of, well, if we just, cut a few more people out of actually getting any help from this thing, then, as long as we make it less helpful, we might entice a Republican into joining us. But only if you make it less helpful. I'm surprised that that's not more clearly spelled out more often.
Yeah, but, that he's not chasing after Republicans. Sure, they can come up and meet with him. He's fine with that. It's sort of a pat on the head, a participation trophy. They got their Oval Office picture.
Okay.
And that works for some people to say, oh, look, unity, bipartisanship. He's reached out.
Yes. I mean, there it is. He had the meeting and everything.
Yeah.
That could be enough.
Of course, there's still Joe Manchin to deal with.
Yes. Right. Well, where is he on this issue? We're just reading that they might...
He's been quieter. Last week he was raising hell about $1,400 being too much to everybody. This week I haven't seen a whole lot out of him. So maybe he's been sort of reprimanded. Maybe having Kamala Harris go to West Virginia and appear on local media sort of sent the message that I think that the administration probably wanted to send.
All right. I was confused about that. I just saw him complaining about her having done this, and I saw people quoting him as saying that he couldn't believe it, and then I couldn't find any story that would explain what couldn't you believe. I'm just not sure. It just the fact that she went to West Virginia and told people what the administration position on COVID relief is bad now because he owns the whole state or something. I'm not really sure what was wrong with what she did in his view, but I guess it just made him politically uncomfortable. But I didn't see any outrage, certainly, and no one offered me any details that made it look like something outrageous had happened. But I don't know, whatever. And he seems over it, and he's been quiet for a while, and so I guess whatever it is was good enough. I don't know. I'm not certain why he's so upset, but I don't know. I guess that will fade. No indication that he wouldn't support a reconciliation option here. I mean, he doesn't.
Yeah,
he's put his marker down on the filibuster, and this one doesn't involve one, so I guess it's okay.
Yeah, he said, this is Biden won. This is his prerogative.
All right.
So
seems fine. We were reading in roll call, they were speculating that they might tailor the reconciliation instructions differently in the Senate such that his committee wouldn't get reconciliation instructions at all. And they made it sound like it was a favor to him, like to spare him tough calls and tough votes. But I would have thought that he might have demanded to have a hand in it, but maybe he just kind of wants to go along and get along on this one.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. So far, we're not seeing. I don't know.
Okay,
it's Manchin.
That's all right to not know. That's the instruction, right? Like Fauci, we just say, I don't know. I was told to say I don't know the answer to that. If you didn't, so why not? We'll take that instruction. It's a new era, the new president. So we'll have to wait and see with that. What else are we waiting and seeing on? Anything else on the congressional radar or elsewhere for that matter? Or?
This is the big one. Okay. But yes, impeachment. I mean.
Okay, you ready for that? All right, sure. I mean, I thought we were setting that aside for now. But I'm happy to talk about it.
We've talked.
Now that we've done our reconciliation work, we can go and do the fun one.
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Thank you.
I mean, since we don't know exactly how reconciliation is going to work, I think we've done what we can.
Yeah. All right. Good. True. That's true. Let's have class outside today. Then we'll talk about impeachment.
It's sort of an interesting thing that Mark wrote about this morning, and I haven't had a chance to really delve into it, but why exactly is Lindsey Graham so insistent that if they want to have witnesses, they have to have the FBI?
Yeah, I did see that. I mentioned that up at the top of the show, and I puzzled on that too. I have no more answers about that than I did about reconciliation, as it turns out, because everyone who I saw react to that threat last night said, okay, good.
Yeah.
We're going to have the FBI come in. All right. I mean, maybe he's forgotten that Trump isn't the president and he can't make the FBI say what he wants him to say. Maybe he never could. I'm very curious about what he thinks the FBI will talk about.
Does he think that the FBI will argue that the insurgents came up with this all on their own without Trump having anything to do with it?
That would be remarkable.
I mean, his quote is, it would open Pandora's box because Republicans will, quote, want the FBI to come in and tell us about how people actually pre-planned this attack, which I don't think is probably a very good idea for Republicans.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you must be right. He must think, well, the FBI's evidence will be that everyone other than Trump was working hard on planning this, and which I guess means that's right. The President of the United States was totally clueless at the most crucial point for democracy ever. He had no idea what was going on. They all thought they were following his instructions, and he didn't have any idea what they were up to. Well, I mean, that's not helpful to your case, to say the least. But still, I'm not certain what the Pandora's box is. It might just be that's a phrase that he likes, but I don't see. If Pandora's box is empty, open it. I don't care. I don't know what you mean. So I don't know. Unless I got no idea. Maybe we'll call people from the New York field office, and Rudy Giuliani will question them. And they're good friends, and they're willing to say anything.
I suppose that's possible.
I
guess. I don't think that House managers would be so foolish as to do that.
I mean, they're not going to call them. I guess it would be his defense lawyers. But I don't know that asking the FBI's Washington headquarters to come and do. Well, it wasn't him. It was Graham saying he would call the FBI if, right? So
right.
What was the triggering event for calling the FBI or having any witnesses at all? Right. That seems bizarre to me.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I guess
I think Lindsey Graham was drunk again.
Oh, you know what? That might be the best explanation that there is to it. We're wandering around trying to figure out, what about if this one? Oh, well, he was drunk off his ass. Oh, yeah, well.
He was drunk off his ass when he denounced Trump, essentially, on January 6th, right after the insurrection.
Okay.
I mean, maybe he wasn't, but he sure appeared to be.
Yeah, I didn't analyze this statement
I should not state unequivocally he was, but man.
Right, you shouldn't let me do that. He was. There you go. I didn't detect that necessarily, but I didn't even bother hitting play on the video.
Yeah, I haven't watched the video actually. I've just seen the quotes. So
it was that frightening to me, as everybody was like, all right, calling the FBI. I guess that'd be all right with me, and I don't see why that goes anywhere. And then what? Trump's lawyer saying, well, we're gonna block them from showing any video of the insurrection. Well, no, you've mistaken this trial for the last one where you were the majority.
Yes, and you got to set the rules.
Yeah, this time I'm pretty sure they're probably going to show the video, and that's it. So
I think Trump doesn't necessarily get the best lawyers.
Right. Well, that's true. They're all, even the lousy ones are resigning. And I don't know where this last one came from, or whether he's going to make it the full week until the trial begins.
The other thing that I'm confused about is he keeps losing lawyers because they don't want to actually go to the Senate and argue that Trump actually won the election.
Yeah.
Like he is insisting that his defense be.
Right. That
I won. That's my defense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
But supposedly the latest set of lawyers say, we're going to go argue that it wasn't him that incited this.
Oh, okay.
With no mention of whether or not he won the election. So I think that there's confusion there too.
Yeah, we'll see whether he jumps up and insists that he gets to speak, or whether he doesn't have to be there. I don't think so. I would imagine he would just stay away.
I'm imagining he's not going to be there.
Yeah, I mean, my guess is he has no interest in it, and just will send the lawyers. But yeah, even what he says he wants them to present, even that wasn't what was being discussed by the lawyer who was on TV. He was saying, well, we're going to say that he had a First Amendment right to rile people up and tell them that he won the election and tell them that they should march to the Capitol. That's fine. And I still think Trump will say, no, you still don't get it. You have to say it was fine for me to send them there because I'm the president and I won and I didn't disrupt anything that was legitimate. I don't know. So we'll see whether he makes more demands on these guys and whether they're truly hewing to his line, or whether they end up resigning in the next 6 days
There are any
too.
lawyers for Trump to show up next week.
Yeah, it would be pretty amazing. And the only thing I regret is that if you were in a court of law and no lawyers would represent you, and and you insisted on making a case that was irrelevant to the charges, you would lose and go to jail. And here, it's just, will Republicans be so uncomfortable voting to acquit when everybody has seen that they haven't even addressed the charges?
Yeah.
That they're embarrassed, but we know the answer is probably no.
They're not capable of embarrassment.
Yeah. All right, well, next week we get to come back and preview that embarrassment being about to happen. So that's exciting. I'm pleased that we can do that. Hope to hear from you again next week. Take care until then.
You certainly will.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Take care, Jones.
From
See you then.
networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
That's right. And what comes next? It's the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam. And, well, I'm sure that there are lots of things that we didn't get to that are on his agenda. Let me see if I can take a quick look. The Hawaii GOP chair has resigned as well. Not doing all that well there with the Republicans in Hawaii. Let's find out why.